Good morning. How are you guys? So, I just got a message today from Geshe-la. Maybe I can put it here on the screen. No, I can't. But it says, "Good morning. I'm going on holidays. Bye." So anyone knows what's happening? So, sounds like a very final bye-bye. Now, I guess that is, I might be going to Sydney or what have you. But anyway, so it's a month of Sakadawa, which is, according to the Tibetan calendar, it's the month in which the Buddha was born, attained enlightenment, and then passed into parinirvana. So here, I think that in this setup, people call Sakadawa just, they refer kind of when we use the term Sakadawa, they refer to the 15th of the whole month. So the whole month in Tibetan is called Sakadawa, not just the 15th. So anything positive that we do in this month, according to the Buddhist tradition, is considered to be pretty powerful. Merit accumulating activities. So and definitely also what we do on the 15th of this month, which is considered to be the actual day in which the Buddha attained the state of enlightenment, is considered to be very powerful. So what I thought of doing today was to look at one verse that is taken from the Tibetan Buddhist tradition, to combine it with what Geshe-la has been speaking of in the Friday morning teachings. And the point that we go to in the Friday morning teachings is going for refuge, which is the entry gate to the teachings of the Buddha. So the verse that I thought of looking at is called Parting from the Four Attachment, which is a verse that was composed by a Tibetan master called Sechen Kunga Nimbo, who comes from the Sakya tradition, is considered to be one of the kind of those great masters from the Sakya tradition. And he presented kind of the attitude that we should have, or that we ought not to have, when we practice the Buddha Dharma. So I thought of combining it together with the things that we've covered in Geshe-la's sessions. But I thought that before doing that, maybe let's just correct the motivation and take the time to do that, as this is Sakadawa. It's considered to be quite a powerful month and very virtuous month if we perform virtue. So I thought of maybe just starting with 5 minutes meditation, if you're all right with that. For those of you who are not used to meditation, it's not that it's really difficult, and that there are things that it's not that there's like a definite thing that you do in your meditation which consists of, which is qualified to be a meditation, things that you ought not to do. Basically, any physical posture that you adopt that works for you is going to be all right. Any pattern that you use in order to quiet your mind is going to be all right. What we want to do essentially is to, first of all, quiet the mind, to make it serviceable or amendable for mental transformation. We also want to make it positive in whatever way we can. So I'm going to use my procedure on the things I use for myself in order to prepare my body and mind for a good meditation. Hopefully, if it works for you, that's okay. If it doesn't work for you, that's also okay. If something else works for you, that's the best. So what I'm going to start with is, first of all, making sure that my body feels all right, comfortable and relaxed. And then that also my mind feels comfortable and relaxed. In order to then do that, I'm going to scan my body from toes all the way up to the crown, and deliberately release any tension or discomfort that I have in my body. We're going to do it together. I'm going to lead you through the stages of doing that. And then I'm going to focus on the breathing process, just in order to settle my mind down, to anchor the mind. So the way that the way that works for me is to count around of 21 breaths. So each breath consists of 4 parts: breathing out, stopping or transitioning to breathing in, and then again transitioning to breathing out. So rather than forcing the breath, I'm just allowing the breathing process to occur completely naturally. Well, just becoming aware of breathing in and breathing out. So that's one round. We're going to do it 21 times, and then we're going to correct our motivation in terms of going for refuge and developing bodhicitta. So for those of you who are used to that, please feel free to join us. For those of you who are not used to that, if it doesn't, try to see if it works for you. If it doesn't work for you, it's okay. You can just develop a positive motivation, thinking that at least I want to be of benefit to myself. I want to also be, as much as I can, of benefit to others. But at least if I cannot be to a great degree of benefit to others, I want to abstain from harming them. So let's first of all begin with correcting our posture. So the most important thing in our meditation posture is to keep the back upright, right? Not too tensed, not slouch. We can become aware in 1 minute of all the stimuli that we get through our sense consciousnesses. If you keep your eyes slightly open, then you might see different forms and shapes and colors in front of you. You're hearing sounds, having some tastes in your mouth. And of course, experience different forms of physical sensations. So rather than chasing them, just acknowledge that they are there. And also you can gauge the space that your body occupies in the room. And then quickly scan your body from toes up to the crown. Beginning with your toes and the back of the feet. And if there's any tension or discomfort, just breathe it out gently. Try to release it, to make it more pleasant. And you can move up to your legs, your shins, your thighs, your knees. And again, if there's any discomfort or tension, just release it with an out breath. Then moving up to the belly, to the abdomen. And we normally hold a lot of tension, thoughts, ideas in the muscles of our belly. So again, with an out breath, try to release it. Just feel comfortable. You keep your chest open and allow the breathing process to occur completely naturally without manipulating it. And keep your shoulders level. without holding them. Just let them fall. When you move up to the muscles of the face, try to keep your mouth slightly open while the tip of the tongue is touching the upper palate. And if there's any tension in your jaws, in the meeting point between the two jaws, just release it with an out breath. And soften your eyes. And let your forehead melt. And after relaxing the body, let's turn our attention to the breathing process and count a round of 21 breaths, right? So breathing out, stopping, and breathing in and stopping. But rather than stopping for a long time, just be mindful of transitioning from breathing out to breathing in. And as we correct the motivation in the beginning of our session, we can recognize that all of us are the same in seeking happiness and well-being and wanting to avoid suffering and pain. So that whatever we do, right from the time that we wake up in the morning, all the way to going to sleep, is directly and indirectly oriented towards seeking happiness, pleasure, comfort, protection, satisfaction, physical pleasure, and mental happiness. And we're directly and indirectly trying to avoid suffering and pain and dissatisfaction, fear, anxiety, and so forth. And all of us are the same in that it seems to our mind that we are completely alone in seeking happiness and well-being and wanting to avoid suffering and pain. After all, we know how it feels to be in pain. We know for ourselves how it feels to have happiness and satisfaction. But then when we think of all the people around us, we can recognize that just like me, inside they have the same feeling, same aspirations, seeking happiness, well-being, and wanting to avoid suffering and pain. It's not only us as human beings, but all living beings are the same in wanting to be safe, wanting to stay alive, to be protected from danger. Wanting to experience pleasure and a sense of ease and relaxation. So then in thinking that in this life, we have obtained a precious human body with freedoms and richnesses that make it possible for us to fully utilize the potential of our own mind. We have spiritual teachers that guide us. Internally, we have everything that we need in order to develop our mind. We were not born in a state in which we are completely prevented from developing our mind. And our life is short, very short. There is no guarantee that we will actually live to being old, that we will reach our 80s and 90s, or even the age of 100. So death is certain, and the time of death is uncertain. When we think of what we can take with us in transitioning from this life to the next, this is not our body, not all the things that we accumulate in our life, our possessions, our money, the things that hold some sentimental value for us, all of them will be left behind. And our friends, our family members, our body. The only thing that we can take with us from this lifetime to the next is our mind and all the positive habits and negative habits as well that we've accumulated in this and previous lives. And should we end up in a miserable state of existence in the next lifetime, let alone not being able to develop our mind further on, it is likely that we will find ourselves in situations where there would be intense physical or mental pain. So then in order to avoid that, I think I'm taking self-direction in the Buddha, the teacher, who taught me how to develop my mind, to utilize fully my own potential. But my actual refuge is in the Dhamma, through paths and through cessations that I develop in my own mind stream. Every bit of virtue that will protect me from future suffering. This is my true refuge in my own positive states of mind. And the deepest one will be the one that realizes reality just as it is, directly. And I also take refuge in the community of spiritual teachers, Buddhas, Bodhisattvas, any teacher that leads me along the stairs for recognizing reality, assist me along the way. They're giving me instructions drawing from the teachings of the Buddha for developing my mind. And my aim is not just to develop my mind to be of benefit to myself, but to be of benefit to myriad living beings that are exactly like me, wanting to be happy, seeking happiness, well-being, satisfaction, mental peace, relaxation, freedom from anger, from attachment, from jealousy, from pride. So for them, I attain the state of a Buddha to be able to be of benefit to all living beings. So with that in mind, we can say the verse for refuge in bodhicitta. We go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the merits I create from listening to the Dhamma, may I become a Buddha in order to benefit all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the merits I create through listening to the Dhamma, may I become a Buddha in order to benefit all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the merits I create for listening to the Dhamma, man become a Buddha in order to benefit all sentient beings. All right, good morning. So for those of you who've just joined us, and those of you outside, you're welcome to come in if you want. What I thought of doing today is to speak of refuge, the verse that we've just recited, so refuge in bodhicitta, but also to draw from one teaching that is given in one verse that is called parting from the four attachments. And I'm doing that because I thought that we're studying together with Geshe in the Friday morning teachings, a text that is called the Middling Presentation of the States of the Path of Enlightenment. And in the previous couple of sessions, we started to look at the topic of refuge, which is what makes us Buddhist. Right? So the demarcation between being Buddhist or not being Buddhist is going for refuge. So if we have the deep sense of trust in our heart, in our mind, in which we think that for me, my actual refuge would be the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Sangha. That makes us Buddhists. So it's not that we have to go through a conversion ceremony, to become Buddhist. It's not that we have to be baptized or to have a formalized ceremony or procedure for becoming Buddhist. If in our heart we think that in order to protect myself from future suffering, not future suffering necessarily in this life, but mainly thinking of what will occur to me in future lifetimes. And even beyond that, how can I emerge from my situation in which kind of I'm still controlled by miserable states of existence, I'm still experience different forms of suffering and pain and states of discomfort and lack of certainty. The way for me to leave that situation and to attain a state of lasting happiness and well-being, in a sense of ease and peace and mental quiescence, for that I go for refuge to the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Sangha. So I regard the Buddha as being the teacher, the one who taught me how to do that. So it's not that the Buddha is someone that creates miracles for me. It's not that the Buddha creates all my happiness and suffering. It's rather that the Buddha is the one, or it's not that the Buddha is someone that rewards me or that punishes me. The Buddha is the one, at least the historical Buddha, is the one that taught us how to develop our mind, to fully utilize our potential, the potential of our own mind. So the Buddha did it himself, right? So the historical, since this is Sakadawa, and this month we become aware of the life of the Buddha, the birth of the Buddha, the enlightenment of the Buddha, the passing away of the Buddha. So the Buddha sought to do it himself, and there are quite a lot of things that are told in the life story of the Buddha, not only his last life, but also many lifetimes that came before. So for me, the Buddha is the teacher. But the actual refuge is my own mind, in a sense that it's not that the Buddha can do the work for me in developing my mind. I have to listen to what the Buddha said. I have to study what the Buddha said, as transmitted to us through our spiritual teachers, through the books that we read, through the different DVDs or YouTube clips that we watch. So we listen to all those different instructions, and then we apply them to our own mind. And our goal is to eliminate our own ignorance, a misconception of reality. If we do that, then we can also rid ourselves of all the other afflictive states of mind that arise from ignorance. We can rid ourselves of anger and attachment and jealousy and pride, all those states of existence which are not in line with reality, even in the slightest. So for me, any positive state of mind that I develop that is either directly or indirectly undermining negative states of mind, for me, that is the actual refuge. So rather than thinking that refuge for me would be somewhere outside, refuge for me is inside, in my own mind, right? It would be you could say that the deepest refuge would be my insight into reality, being able to see reality exactly as it is, without the overlays of ignorance, without this distortion of anger or attachment or pride or jealousy or all other afflictive states of mind. For me, seeing reality as it is would be the key for developing mental happiness and well-being. But in order to do that, then I need also to develop positive states of mind in general, loving kindness and compassion, the wish to live cyclic existence, the recognition of coarse levels of reality, to come to terms with my own impermanence, right? To think of my own death and impermanence, to recognize my own potential, to be able to develop ethical discipline in which I know that certain things are not good for me, not conducive for me, and to be able in my mind to develop firm recognition of having to develop an ethical conduct in order to protect myself from future suffering. So all of those different things are included within the mind, in a sense that if I develop those positive states of mind, that for me would be the actual protection from suffering. And then I have the third object of refuge, which we call the Sangha. So normally we call the Sangha, or we refer to the Sangha as monastics, right? Those that wear the monastic robes. But there's a deeper sense of Sangha. Anyone that realizes reality directly, perceptually, is what we call Sangha. The words for Sangha in Tibetan is Gendun, which means that someone that is approaching virtue, someone that is approaching the insight into reality. So anyone that has developed an insight into reality, if they're monastic, if they're non-monastic, if they're lay person, men or women, whoever they are, if they have a direct insight into reality, they are Sangha. So when we look at the conventional Sangha that we normally think of, right? So either monastics or other teachers, we think of those that teach us what the Buddha taught, what the Buddha said. So the Buddha was alive 2,600 years ago. We might have been around when the Buddha was there and teaching in India. You know, I don't know, maybe you've been there. I don't know where I was 2,600 years ago. I know whether I was there or whether I was just hanging out, kicking back and relaxing somewhere else, or maybe I was laboring quite hard somewhere else. Anyway, so since it is likely that many of us haven't met the Buddha in person, or not seeing Buddhas around us in actuality at the moment, then we need a community of teachers that teach us the Dhamma. They can be monastics, but they can also be lay people. For us, they're the the mediation between the Buddha and ourselves. They provide us with the teachings of the Buddha. So this is what we can also regard as Sangha. In some Buddhist groups, the members of the groups are called Sangha. They are your Dhamma friends, Dhamma brothers and sisters. You can call them Sangha, but essentially anyone that helps you to develop your own mind, that gives you instructions, that you look up to, that you can follow their example, you can say that they come under the banner of Sangha. So I'm saying that because refuge is the gateway for the Buddha Dhamma. So internally, if we decide that I want to fix my mind, I want to correct my mind to the point in which I completely eliminate my own ignorance, attain complete freedom from ignorance, from anger, from attachment, and so forth, and thereby remain in that state of lasting happiness and well-being. And when I say lasting happiness and well-being, it sounds as if we're going to sit somewhere cross-legged with a smile on our face, be worried about nothing whatsoever. State of liberation is not necessarily that. It's more like state of liberation is a state that we develop in our own mind, in which anger, attachment, and ignorance are no longer there. So when we try to entertain this notion of how it'd be like to have a mind that is completely free from attachment, completely free from anger, having no ignorance whatsoever, and how much peace and well-being you will experience if your mind is completely free from those states. So it's not necessarily that you will sit somewhere with a smile on your face and gaze into the empty space in front of you. It's more like it is a mind that is completely in sync with reality, in which you see those around you, and you understand exactly what they go through, or at least to varying degrees, you understand what they go through, and you have a open heart and open mind, and you could do whatever you can in order to assist those around you, but still with a mind that is at ease, with a mind that is happy, with a one that is relaxed. It's total sense of ease and relaxation in that sense. So if this is what we seek, then the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Sangha are objects of refuge that can help us to get to that state. So in Geshe-la's teachings in the last few months, we've been gearing up to looking at the topic of refuge. Right? So this is what we've been doing during the Friday morning sessions. So we spoke of topics as, first of all, relying upon a spiritual teacher. So when we look at this presentation of the Lamrim, it begins with, first of all, recognizing that in order to develop our mind, we need to rely upon a spiritual teacher that will teach us how to do that. So we spoke of relying upon a spiritual teacher. Then we spoke of making an exhortation to make the most out of life in recognizing that we have freedoms and richnesses, or freedoms and opportunities. So we recognize that in the Tibetan language, it is said that we recognize that we have a precious human body. In English, we normally say that we have a precious human life. The summation of this topic is recognizing that we have everything that we need in order to develop our mind. Nothing is missing. Right, so we were not born in states of existence, non-human states of existence, which would have meant that not only physically our situation could have been really difficult, but also we would be lacking the mental capacity to make a great progress. We would not have the wisdom, the ability to use language, the ability to use discernment, wisdom, and so forth in order to develop our mind. So we are free from those states. We're also free from certain wrong views that prevent us from opening our mind to looking at reality and how we can make a great progress. We're free from situations in which either the teachings are not available to us, or that we live maybe in a place or in a culture that makes it quite difficult for us to look at spirituality and develop our mind, or to look at other traditions and develop our mind. So we're free from all of them. We're free from being born in periods or states in which the teachings are completely unavailable. So basically, when we recognize that we have the ability to develop our mind, we also recognize that it is actually quite rare to be able to recognize that, and also to be genuinely interested in making a change in our mind. And particularly when we look at people around us, either our immediate family or friends and relatives, or when we look at what's happening around us in society in general, I think that we can recognize that actually not many people are keen on developing their mind. Most people in the world are just going through the motions, trying to, let's say, make a living, have a successful family life, make money, enjoy comforts, strive for comforts, and so forth. And all along, we've been experiencing, I guess, in society, different problems and different difficulties, mainly surrounding not being able to really find what we're looking for. So it is quite rare, I think, to find that situation where you think that actually, I've tried quite a lot. I'm still trying to make everything work outside all the external conditions around me to be perfectly in line so that everything will work perfectly for me. Most people in the world are still trying to just change the outside situation, outside circumstances in order to be happy, to attain perfect happiness and well-being. So we recognize to different degrees that just focusing on the outside is not going to cut it. It's not going to be enough in order to reach that perfect state of happiness and well-being. There's something that we need to address internally. Not many people actually recognize that. At least when I think of my background, if you wonder about my accent, so I grew up in Israel, and I think that now probably there are 9 million people in Israel. Not many people are, I think, in Israel are deeply interested in mental development. But also, I mean, I've been living here in Australia for 16 years. How many people in Australia are keenly interested in mental development? Of course, you can develop your mind not only in a Buddhist way, you can develop your mind also when you practice Christianity and Islam and Judaism and Hinduism or what have you. But how many people are keenly interested in doing that? Not just kind of going through the motion of doing certain rituals and celebrating this holiday or the other holidays. How many people are keenly interested in ridding themselves of anger, jealousy, pride, attachment, or developing an insight into reality? Actually, we're a very small minority. I think that when you think of the number of Buddhists in Australia, I think that as far as I remember, according to the previous census, we were maybe 2.5% of Australian population. I can't remember. But then of them, we have a great community of Chinese and Vietnamese and other people that come from Asian countries for whom Buddhism is more of a tradition, a religion, rather than something that they're keenly interested in, right? So I have friends, Vietnamese friends and Chinese friends, not only here in Australia, but also in other places that I've been to. And many of them kind of see themselves as Buddhists, but they're not really interested in mental development. I guess it's like here, like many Christians here in Australia, right? So people are into celebrating Easter and Christmas or what have you, but it's not a, most people are interested in deeply practicing a religion. So in Buddhism, it's also like that. So when you think of the number of Buddhists, here in Australia, I guess that probably you might say that those who are keenly interested in developing the mind maybe are a few thousands, a few tens of thousands. I would say that it is likely that we don't even have 100,000 people here in Australia that are deeply interested and motivated to developing the mind, to rid himself of anger, attachment, and ignorance, and putting the teachings into practice. At least, I don't know if I'm right or wrong about it, but I think that all in all, when we think of how keenly we're interested in doing that, probably not many. So we recognize that not only we have freedoms and richnesses, but it is actually quite rare to get to the point in which we're totally invested in doing something about it. And then we also recognize that our time is short. That, as I said, as I said in the meditation, death is certain, and the time of death is uncertain. And at the time of death, nothing will be of help apart from the Dharma, in the sense that when we think of going from this lifetime to the next, right? So if we believe in the existence of past and future lifetimes, and we think of death not being the end of the road for us, but then going on and taking another rebirth, whatever we accumulate in this life, all the comforts, all the things that we accumulate in our homes, our houses, all our friends and relatives, all of them will be left behind. Even the body that we cherish so much will be left behind, and will continue completely empty-handed, you could say, from this lifetime to the next. I think that in Lama Tsongkhapa's Lamrim Chemo, he says that it's like pulling hair out of a cup of butter, in which nothing sticks to it, right? So if we think of our mind kind of leaving the body, without anything sticking to the mind, our bank account is not attached to the mind. Our body is not attached to the mind, right? The mind leaves the body. All our friends and relatives are not attached to the mind. All the things that we accumulate in our life, all the ceramics and coins and pictures and drawings and so forth, all of this, all the photos that we hold, all the mobile phones that we have, all the computers that we have, or what have you, all of them will be left behind. And the only thing that will continue with us from this lifetime to the next is our mind. And all the, of course, karma that we've accumulated that is going with our mind, with some imprints or potential from this lifetime to the next, and all the positive and negative habits that we've developed, all of them go with us to next lifetime, and all the rest is left behind. So we think of death and impermanence, and then when we start to think of what awaits for us in future lifetimes, we develop a sense of fear and apprehension of being born in a miserable state of existence, the one that in which not only we will find it difficult to protect ourselves from danger, from fear, from lack of satisfaction, from physical pain and mental anguish, but also we will be completely bereft of opportunities and abilities to develop our mind. There would be no opportunity for us to meet a spiritual teacher, to listen to teaching, to understand them, and to continue our practice. So then developing kind of this sense of fear and apprehension of what could happen to us in future lifetimes, we're seeking a sense of protection. And the sense of protection is in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. Right? The Buddha is the teacher. The actual protection are the positive states of mind that we develop. And when I say positive, it's not just kind of love and compassion, it's also knowledge, wisdom, having an insight into coarse levels of reality and subtle level of reality. And then Sangha, as I said, the community of teachers that can teach us what to do. So this is the point that we got to in Lama Tsongkhapa's middling stage of middling presentation of the states of the path of enlightenment. And what I thought of doing teaching or what I thought of speaking of today is to add a few more points into a way of going for refuge, because when you look at Lama Tsongkhapa's presentation, he begins with going for refuge as a practice or a state of mind that you begin with when you train your mind in states of the path that are shared with those of small capacity. So those of small capacity, and those are the things that we've covered up until now, are those that think of going for refuge because, first of all, they develop a sense of fear and apprehension of what is awaiting for them in the next rebirth. So fearing, for example, miserable states of existence. It's quite hard for us actually to be totally motivated by that sense of fear. I mean, we speak about it quite a lot. And the Buddhist teachings are full of full-on descriptions of what could happen to us in future lifetimes. I think that if you come from a certain form of spirituality, it might be quite, I think, easy for you to contemplate what Lama Tsongkhapa says in the Lamrim Chemo. Like, for example, he speaks quite a lot about hellish states of existence. We call them the hells, right? Cold hells and hot hells. When you look at Lama Tsongkhapa's presentation, it's pretty graphic. It's full of gore. So I think that, if you, I guess that if you were brought up in maybe a Catholic background or other forms of backgrounds in which speaking about hellish states of existence in that way, it might actually be quite easy for you to relate to that and then to think that this is not what I'm into. This is not what I want to, this is not a state that I want to end up with. I think that if you were born in, if you're born in other spiritual or religious background, or if you're not prone to think of future lifetimes in that way, it might be more challenging to think of the description that Lama Tsongkhapa gives in his Lamrim Chemo that describes hellish states of existence. But anyway, we can also think of, for example, how it'd be like to be born as an animal, in which our mental capacity is really limited. We can try to think of how it'd be like to experience the world from the viewpoint of dogs or cows or animals in the meat industry. It's funny that we call them industries as if we're producing something. I mean, what is produced is actually quite a lot of pain and suffering, and of course, meat or dairy and so forth. But now when we think of, regardless of that, when we think of how it'd be like to find ourselves in that situation where we're completely confined and there is no ability to take care of our immediate needs, completely controlled by others, but also a mental state is completely confused and in complete pain, then we can think that this is definitely not a situation that I want to end up in. So we think of fear. That's the first cause for going for refuge. Then we think of faith. that the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Sangha have the ability to give us protection. And when we say that they have the ability to give us protection, they can afford protection. It's not that the protection comes from the Buddha, Dhamma, and the Sangha, from their side. It's not that they're kind of reaching out to us and pulling us out from our state of existence. I mean, you can say that in some sense they are, but it's not that the Buddha is like a magician, or it's not that we have that idea of a Buddha like being an omnipotent God like we have in Christianity, Islam, or Judaism. So the Buddha cannot protect us in that sense. Had the Buddha been able to do that, the Buddha, or any Buddha would have done that long ago. Had Buddhas been able to actually protect us from suffering and pain, none of us would have experienced that. No one would be experiencing the pain of hunger and thirst and war and famine and all other states that we experience. Buddhas can afford protection from the point of view of being able to teach us what we need to do in order to protect ourselves, in order to attain a state of liberation for ourselves. So these are the two causes for going for refuge: fear and faith. Often we don't want to kind of go for refuge. I think that sometimes we don't want to go for refuge from using the motivation of fear, because it sounds like maybe it's not that noble to go for refuge out of fear. We want to go for refuge when we're being informed, when this is our own choice. But actually, when you think of, rather than thinking of developing a sense of fear where you're completely debilitated or crippled and you can't do anything, you cannot do anything about your situation, it's more like being worried about what's going to happen to you in the future. Thinking that there are states of existence or things that I definitely need to prevent, things that I definitely need to protect myself from. And rather than expecting someone else to do the work for me, I need to do the work for myself. So we call it fear, but maybe it's not the fear that we normally think of, which is completely unrational or completely instinctual. It's more like a fear that is developed, first of all, from knowledge of what can occur to us in future lifetimes. What are the possibilities that are awaiting for us? And how grim will it be if we're not going to take good care of ourselves, of our own mind in this life? So this is the type of fear that we're speaking of. So then, Chris, did you have, I saw you kind of nodding your head, so I'm wondering if you have. Hmm. 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 Yeah, kind of. It's. I think that kind of what you said, and I'll repeat it for the people at home. You said that kind of you don't want to operate on the basis of fear. Kind of you're sick of this rhetoric of kind of speaking about fear and hellish states of existence and dangers and so forth. It sounds like someone is trying to instill fear in you. That will make you more like I guess it's an attitude that is quite common in like a blind faith attitude. So you don't want to do that. You want to have a sense of concern. Yeah, sense of concern for our own well-being in the future and inspiration. Yeah, kind of. I think that's what we need to overcome when we think of the word fear, right? So rather than thinking about it, it's just kind of fear in which someone is trying to instill fear in us. Although sometimes maybe it is needed. I mean, sometimes we do need kind of someone to kind of slap us in our face and say, if you're not going to pick up your game, that's what's awaiting for you. So someone might instill fear in us, but really what we're speaking of is taking responsibility for our own welfare in the future. Thinking that if I'm not going to pick up my game, that's could be the consequences of my own actions, right? So it could be completely rational rather than irrational fear. I mean, sometimes it's quite confusing because when when you listen to teachings by some teachers, they go on and on and on about the hell realms and hungry ghosts and animals and so forth. And it does sound like pretty religious and quite kind of fear-inspiring teachings. But I think that at the end, the purpose is to develop concern for ourselves, kind of to make sure that we think of what is awaiting for us in the future and make sure as much as we can that we do not end up in miserable states. That's a state of fear, a sense of fear that we develop. So apprehension, maybe apprehension works better, or maybe a sense of concern. Any other words that work better? Sorry? Yeah, the hell rounds totally suck. Yeah, I agree. Hands down. Curiosity. So the kind of the physical feeling of being kind of curious or being scared sounds quite similar. I guess that curiosity maybe is even a prelude to fear or to a sense of concern. I mean, thinking of, for example, we do need to be curious in the sense of what's going to happen to us in the future. Is, for example, this life, is it the only lifetime that exists, or are the future lives? Michelle is asking from home, what is mind stream, right? So we have a continuity of consciousness that goes from this lifetime to the next. And consciousness, I think that we can explain what consciousness is in normal terms, like when you think of how consciousness is explained in the Buddhist tradition, the definition is that which is clear and knowing. It doesn't give us much to work with, right? That which is clear and knowing. We have a continuity of cognition. And I think that the easiest way to recognize that is to start to just become aware of our own consciousness, to become aware of just knowing, mere knowing. So we have a continuity of that. And when we develop curiosity with respect to, first of all, our cognition, our mind and cognition, and the ability to know different things, that the ability or the potential is there, we then also become curious about whether we can develop our mind in a positive way, whether we can avoid negative states of mind. What will occur to us, for example, in after death? Do future lifetimes exist? All those different things can be approached with curiosity. And out of that, maybe fear can also arise, or apprehension or concern, wanting to take responsibility for our own welfare. But also, all of these are states of mind, and I agree that also they have physical reactions. And indeed, curiosity or happiness or kind of excitation sometimes is somewhat similar to fear. There is that sense of kind of being on edge, heart palpitation, and so forth. Yeah, the physical manifestation is different. It could be quite similar. But then mentally, I think that we can still see how different they are. Ollie is saying that he thinks that existential angst is enough of a stimulus rather than fear of hell realms. Yeah, I think that whatever works for you guys, it's okay, right? It's not that the only thing that is valid is kind of a deeply religious attitude. I think that if you want to find out what works for you, then you need to listen to different teachings or to read different books and then find out what works for you, but without excluding all the rest. I mean, I think that probably if we don't think of ending up in miserable states of existence in the future, if we don't think about it at all, I'm wondering whether a refuge would be a solid refuge. I mean, this is something that we need to to look into. If we don't think at all about what's awaiting for us in next life, are we going to have pure refuge? So when the Buddha taught refuge. He said that the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Sangha are objects of refuge for those who desire liberation, which means that they're not refuges, or they're not proper refuges if you only think of what could occur to you in this life. So if your main concern, sole concern, or main concern is what occurs to you in this life, you could go for refuge to the Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha, but this is not pure refuge. I mean, our refuge should be leading us to the state of liberation from samsara. In order to do that, then we need to think of the whole of samsara. We need to think of what would occur to us in future lifetimes. What are the different states of existence that we could end up with? Because all of them are included within samsara. So, yeah, existential angst could be a stimulus, but also at some point, I think that we still need to assess what will occur to us in future lifetimes. Mm. Yeah. Mm. Yeah. Yeah, so Chris is saying, I'm just saying it, repeating it more or less for the people at home. So he said that it's not like kind of you don't believe in those states of existence. You do believe that there are kind of infinite universes or infinite states of existence that we could end up with. It's more like just the word fear doesn't resonate well with you. I think that probably kind of we have to recognize that we come from different spiritual backgrounds, you know, so it might be that something that kind of puts us off is something that we were used to before, and we need to find ways to maybe word it differently in order to work, for it to work better for us. But then I think that at the end we have to go beyond the words. If the word fear doesn't work for you, it's okay. If you get the meaning, it does all the work. No, you don't need the word fear if you get to the meaning. If you know that kind of what you're concerned about your future, you don't need to call it fear. You can just say a sense of concern. Mm. So you're saying, TY, that with respect to hells and so forth, if you experience that, just trying to reword what you said in order to make sure that I understood what you said. So if you experience that, maybe you can use that in order to elevate yourself from that state. You can learn from not running from it. Yeah, because there are lessons that you can find in them. I think that probably when we look at our situation, our state of existence as human beings, there are certain situations that we experience, and some of them are hellish. So when we speak of the hells from a Buddhist perspective, that kind of deeply graphic gore way of description, it does speak about states of existence which are non-human. But then we can still think of really difficult states of existence that we experience as human beings, which are similar to that. And you can certainly learn from those situations and think that actually this is not what I want to experience. And there are certain things that I can do, like certain ways that I can develop my mind in order to make sure that in the future, I do not experience them. So you could say that we have two levels of dealing with them. In this life, we can make sure that when we experience horrible situations, we do not let our mind be brought down. That our mind does not find itself in an utter sense of despair in which we become completely despondent. So we can learn from these situations, not only with ourselves, but also with those that surround us. We can think of death and impermanence, the reality of impermanence. We can think of how we are lacking control because the control is within the hands of karma and afflictions. We can think of how if we develop faith and conviction and so forth, there are some things that we can do in order to change our perspective in order to deal with our situation better. But also we can think that if this is what I experience now, I can change the circumstances for future lifetimes so that I will not have to experience that again. So in that sense, you learn from those situations. And also certainly you can develop courage and fortitude and compassion to others and so forth. So yeah, you can use that as in being a human being. But also when you think of what will occur to you if you end up in those miserable states of existence, not as a human being, it is likely that we will not have the mental clarity actually to think about it, to learn from that experience and to emerge from that. So we want to prevent that from occurring actually from the outset. So we've started to speak about it because the two causes for going for refuge are said to be fear and faith, or concern. Let's say concern and faith. Faith that the Buddha, the Dhamma, and Sangha have the ability to protect us from suffering. And when we relate to faith, it's not that it's just kind of blind faith in which we just trust that they have the ability to do that. The type of faith that we want to develop is an informed faith. Faith that is born from knowledge, which means that in order to have that solid sense of faith in the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Sangha, first of all, we have to study a lot. And it's interesting because refuge is found at the beginning of the presentation of the steps of the path of enlightenment. So it assumes that you have some prior knowledge. So in order to have faith that is born from knowledge, first of all, we need to know what the Buddha is. And there are a lot of things that we can study about the Buddha, right? So the different bodies of Buddha. What is the Dhammakaya? What is the Rupakaya? What is the Sambhogakaya? What is the Nimanakaya? All those different words and terms that we might have had before in Buddhist teachings. In order to understand well what a Buddha is, we need to understand them. We need also to understand the qualities of a Buddha's mind, qualities of infinite love, infinite knowledge, and also the ability to be of benefit to others. We need to know, for example, what are the stages by which someone can become Buddha, how this is possible. Then we also need to know the qualities of the Dhamma. What is the actual Dhamma jewel? What are true paths? What is the meaning of true cessations? And also, what is the meaning of the Sangha? So if we develop knowledge of those topics, that comes from studying those topics, but also through discussing them together with your Dhamma friends, together with our teachers, and also then taking it on into your meditation practice and thinking of how it'd be like, for example, to have a mind that is completely free from anger, attachment, and ignorance. Can you have a mind that is completely free of anger, attachment, and ignorance? Is it possible to develop an antidote that will completely once and for all eliminate all of our ignorance? Can we develop a mind that in every moment sees reality directly, perceptually, without the veils of ignorance? Is it possible? Do we have a potential for developing infinite love, infinite compassion, infinite ethics, infinite generosity, infinite patience? Can we do that? So those are the things that you also need to think of in your meditation session in order to habituate your mind. First of all, with the ability to do that, but also then to habituate your mind with the means to accomplish those infinite potentials, to develop those infinite potentials. So when you do that, I think that it takes years to develop an understanding of the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Sangha. Then you work towards kind of really going for refuge. I remember that before ordination, before I took ordination, when it came down to the crunch time, I was wondering if I'm Buddhist. You know, I've been going as like on a Buddhist automatic pilot cruise control for maybe 15 years before I became a monk. And I thought to myself, I'm not sure actually that I'm just before ordination, I thought myself, I'm not sure actually that I'm Buddhist. I'm not sure that actually I go for refuge to the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Sangha, in that I have a deep sense of conviction, first of all, in the existence of future lifetimes, but also that I have the ability to completely liberate my mind. So when we then go for refuge and develop these two causes, fear and faith, faith has a lot of background knowledge, thinking, reflection, and meditation that is assumed in order to properly go for refuge. And also, I think that at each point in time when we become Buddhists and throughout the years, we can revisit our going for refuge and wonder if we are doing it well or if we've already gone for refuge. So it's still work in progress for me, and I guess that for many of us. So then when we look at the way that we go for refuge, as I said, it is taught in the Lamrim as part of the steps of the path that are shared with those of small capacity. So the fear that we speak of is fear of miserable state of existence. But then really when we want to turn a refuge to be a complete practice, an all-encompassing practice, it has to be more than that. So the fear that we want to develop is fear not only of what awaits for us in future lifetimes, but also the fear of all the different states that are included within samsara. And then in order to understand that, we look at the description of true suffering, which is pretty full on. You have so many different classifications and types of suffering that the Buddha explained. So not only suffering of miserable states of existence, but the 6 types of sufferings, which explain how in whatever experience we experience states of uncertainty. Our state within cyclic existence is just full of uncertainty. We change situations from this lifetime to the next. We have no certainty that next lifetime will again come up with your upper hand in a good state of existence. There's not, let alone there's no certainty in future lifetimes. There is also no certainty in this lifetime. There is no, the number of rebirths that we've already taken is great. The number of bodies that we've already taken is great. The number of enjoyments that we've already enjoyed is great. And yet there is no end to it. In that, so long as we continue in that uncertain state of cyclic existence, we'll still continue to be tormented by different types of suffering. We are born alone and we die alone, in that no one can actually partake of the experience of suffering and pain and fear and loneliness that we experience. Even those that are close to our heart cannot actually experience what we undergo inside upon death and birth. So we think about these types of suffering of uncertainty. One of the most crucial type of suffering that the Buddha spoke of is, and the word for suffering in Tibetan is dungel, which doesn't only refer to this physical and mental pain that we experience, or in Sanskrit, it is dukkha. It's not just kind of those physical or mental sensation. It is, for example, having a body such as this, which make us susceptible to injury. Because of having a body such as this, we are doomed, or we're destined, you could say, to the experience of pain in this lifetime, physical pain and mental pain. And because of a body such as this, that supports our consciousness of a human being, anger, attachment, and so forth arise in relation to different experiences that we have. Not only anger, attachment, and so forth are creating problems for us in this life, but also they compound the suffering that we experience in future lifetimes, because when we experience certain things with our body, and then anger, attachment, and so forth arise, they cause us to perform actions that result in future suffering. So then when we think of this body that we have, we come to recognize that actually, so long as we have something like that, a body such as this, which came to me because I am controlled by karma and afflictions for that long, this will continue. For that long, even if I do not want to experience suffering, there will be suffering and pain for me, not only in this lifetime, but future lifetime. So when we think of the sense of concern for ourselves, we think of, actually, I don't want to continue with forever, for birds on end in cyclic existence, to have a physical body such as this, or a physical body of an animal or a mosquito, or what have you, that compounds suffering in this life, but also in future lifetimes. So the fear or the concern that I have is of all the dissatisfactory states that I experience within samsara. And again, I have faith that the Buddha, the Dhamma, and Sangha have the ability to protect me from that. And then we take on the fear to the next level, or the sense of concern for the next level. Because when we think of those who are close to our heart, at least in our immediate surrounding, we, as I said at the beginning of our meditation today in the morning, we recognize that although to our mind, it seems that we are the only people that have those experiences, that we know those experiences first-handed, and we know how painful they are, since that we don't really know what's happening in others' minds, in others' bodies, but then we can still think that actually they're just like us, they're not different. It seems to us in our mind that there's this separation between me and others. I'm this completely independent and discrete person. And the only thing that I can know is my own experiences. But then when we try to extend our mind and to put ourselves in the shoes of others, we can think of how actually others have exactly the same feelings, same wishes, very basic feelings and wishes to be protected, to be well, to be safe. So of course we can think about it, I think, in an easy way with those who are close to our heart. If you have a partner, or even more than that, if you have children, then I think that you can easily identify with what they go through. You can easily identify with that sense of fear or anxiety, particularly when you take care of someone from, I think, from the very early stages of development, you know, when they're a baby, an infant growing up and so forth. You can see how their behavior also is affected by the way of thinking, but also the mental suffering or mental happiness is pretty much related to the way that they experience the world around them. And you think that I want to protect them from suffering. So then it's easy to recognize that with those who are close to our heart. Then when we try to extend a mind to those who are not that close to our heart, you know, so many people and beings that are around us every day, we don't really know them well. It might be that you know the names. It might be that you even talk to them on a daily basis, but you don't really know who they are. Like, for example, I don't know the name of the current person who is running the post office down at Udlo, but Kathy was there for many years. You know, so every month, maybe sometimes every few months, or sometimes twice a month, I would go down and we have like a small chat, short chat. But really, I don't know her. No, I know her by name, and we talk, but I don't really know her. I don't know her family situation. I don't know what ticks her. I don't know what she likes. I don't know what she feels. I don't know if she's happy in life. We have conversations, but I know nothing about her. So, but just like me, she wants to be happy. She doesn't want to experience suffering. So we can think about it not only with those that we meet on a daily basis that we know nothing of, but also kind of those faceless people around us, those that we see in the street, people that stand in street corners, homeless, or begging for money. Those people that we see on television, politicians that we like, and also politicians that we dislike, people that are involved in doing great for the sake of others, but also people that are doing actually quite poorly, those that are damaging themselves, and also they're creating quite a lot of problems for others. So just like me, they have that basic wish to be happy. I mean, we can strip it down to a very kind of basic impulse. It doesn't always have to be stated in words, kind of just a basic desire. I want to be well, want to be happy, want to be protected. I want to be satisfied. I want to be peaceful. And I want to avoid all those suffering, problems, pain, dangers, and so forth. So then with the third type of fear that we can develop is fear of not being able to do what we can in order to provide them with happiness and well-being. in order to protect them from suffering and pain, because we recognize that just like us, they have the same basic wishes and expectations. So to develop that sense of fear requires a lot of effort. I mean, first of all, you might think, why would anyone want to develop that sense of fear that is involved with wanting to protect others from suffering and pain? You can think about those who are close to our heart. I want to protect them. I want to protect my friends. I want to protect the ones that belong to my clan, that belong to my group, that are in my camp. But who cares about other people? Who cares about what happens to people in other places in the world that I've never been to? And definitely I don't know those people. And who cares about the people that I disagree with? I mean, who cares about the people that belong to the other political camp? So it's much harder to develop a sense of concern that deeply recognizes that they're just like me. Kind of strip it down to the very basic of being just like me and seeking happiness and well-being. But also, in order to do that, we want to recognize that sense of connectedness that all of us have. Particularly when we think about it from the perspective of many lifetimes that we've already been to, many lifetimes that we will go through in the future. Although now it seems that we're completely removed from them. We have no relationship with them whatsoever. It is likely that we were deeply related to them, either in one of our previous lifetimes, and it will be connected to them in future lifetimes. But also in this lifetime, there are so many things that they could contribute to that have to do with my welfare. Like, for example, at least here in Australia, where you have, it's like a multicultural society and very affluent society. You can go to an Indian restaurant, Chinese restaurant, Thai, Korean, Turkish, Middle Eastern, or what have you. The things that I buy in the supermarket that are coming from different parts of the world were manufactured by so many people that I have no idea of. I've never met them. It is likely that there are hundreds of thousands of people that are involved with producing the things that I enjoy. It's not that they have that deliberate thought to benefit me, the person that lives in Australia and happens to be a Buddhist monk, but still, I am connected to them. Even if I kind of think that it's not that I had a motivation to do that, I still depend upon them, whether I like it or not. So then when we think of the fear that we develop, the third type of fear that we develop in going for refuge, it is the fear of not being able to do enough to be of benefit to them. And particularly when we look at it from a Mahayana perspective, it is the fear of having what we call cognitive obscurations. So currently we have obscurations in our mind stream, which are like veils, let's say, which are preventing us from knowing all the dispositions of other living beings. If I have the knowledge of all the other dispositions of all living beings, I would be able to give teachings that are suitable to them if they are in a situation where they can work with the mind. So for example, how would it be like if I know exactly what ticks Crystal or Angela or Ruby and so forth? I'd be able to kind of give them teachings, not only on a kind of in general, those that are called with a social background or cultural background, historical background, and so forth. Also, I will be able to know on a daily basis, on an hour-to-hour basis, what is the best thing to say, the most useful thing to say, in order to change the perspective, in order to kind of get their attention, in order to change the way of thinking. So unless I have this knowledge of all those different dispositions, I'm not going to be able to be of perfect benefit to others. So the fear is of those sets of obscurations does prevent me from knowing all those different dispositions. It is possible to remove that those cognitive obscurations, and it is done through developing an insight into reality, a perceptual realization of emptiness, but it will come up later down the road, kind of very far away in the future. But so long as I'm unable to know the dispositions of others, I will not be able to be of perfect benefit to them. Of course, you can say that I can know what the dispositions of monkeys and cows and so forth, but really it's not going to benefit them on an immediate level. I can maybe benefit on an immediate level those that have the capacity to listen to teachings and then work up with the mind in order to develop an insight into reality. And so long as I do not have that knowledge, for that long, I cannot be of perfect benefit to others. So we think of that fear, and also we have the conviction that the Buddha, the Dhamma, and Sangha have the ability to protect us from that. And that if we develop our mind and we develop an insight into reality, a perceptual realization of emptiness, paired up with bodhicitta, the wish to attain the state of enlightenment for the benefit of all sentient beings, then at the end I would be able to protect them from suffering. So, although in this session I wanted to then speak mainly of the four parting from the four attachments, it seems that we haven't got to that. So let's at least mention that, because I think that it is connected with what we the points that I've made. Sorry, it's not this one. There it is. Okay. So parting from the four attachments, say, if you cling to this life, you're not a Dhamma practitioner. In that if you think of just the mentioning of having to become mindful of death and impermanence, thinking that death is certain and the time of death is uncertain. And at the time of death, nothing will be of help apart from the Dhamma. If you don't think about it, it means that it is likely that your orientation is still mainly focusing on this life. And so long as your orientation is mainly focusing on this life, how can I make this lifetime more comfortable, better, and so forth? If that's your main focus, whatever you do is not a real Dhamma practice. I mean, you can practice the Dhamma. You can use certain things that are taught in the Dhamma to make this lifetime better. You can cultivate compassion in many things that will make this lifetime better. You can cultivate loving kindness, patience, generosity in thinking that it will make this lifetime better. But if that's your main orientation, even if you do use all those great Dhamma practices, it's not a Dhamma practice. To have a solid Dhamma practice, you need, first of all, to ask yourself, what will occur to me in future lifetimes and beyond that? And then to go for refuge, motivated by the thought of what will occur to me in my future lifetimes. But then you also need to increase that in thinking, if I cling to cyclic existence, I'm not renounced. I don't have the determination to live cyclic existence. So we might be only concerned with what will occur to me, what will occur to us in our next lifetime, in thinking that if I again end up as a human being, that will kick ass. I'll be sorted. You know, definitely if I'm born again in Australia or another affluent society, things will work best for me. If we don't think of all the drawbacks of cyclic existence and then develop the real determination to live cyclic existence, even if we practice, even if we go for refuge to Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha, we'll still continue to experience a lot of suffering in samsara. So long as we do not think of suffering to a great degree and completely develop the wish to emerge from cyclic existence, for that long, we're not going to be sorted yet, let's say. So then it says in the third line, if you cling to your own purpose, you're not a bodhisattva, or you're not a Mahayana practitioner. So we think of the third type of fear, which is involved with still having cognitive obscurations. If we think only of ourselves in seeking happiness and well-being for ourselves alone, and we don't recognize that everyone else is just like us, and we're just one single individual, and there are countless other living beings that experience suffering and pain, and just like us, they want to be happy, they want to be well. If we only think about ourselves, our practice is not going to be a Mahayana practice. And then the last line says that if grasping arises, there is no view, which means that if you grasp it yourself as existing independently, inherently, if you're grasping at everything around you to exist in the way that it appears to you. So the way that things appear to us is if they exist completely in and of themselves by their own power. So when I look at you guys, it seems that all of the people in front of me exist completely in and of themselves by their own right, by their own power, without my mind seeing them in a particular way, as if kind of there's you sitting there and my mind sitting here, and there's that disconnect between my mind and you, that you have nothing to do with my mind. Not only there's that appearance as if you exist out there without being connected to my mind, also I completely believe in that appearance, I completely assent to that appearance. And so long as this grasping is things to exist in the way that they appear as if they're external to my mind and disconnected from my mind, to exist completely in and of themselves for that long, there is no view of reality. So Sachin Kunga Nimbo spoke of these four clingings. If you cling to this life, you're not a Dharma practitioner. If you cling to cyclic existence, there is no renunciation. You're not determined to live cyclic existence. If you cling to your own purpose, thinking that my happiness is more important than others, or at least I can do something for myself, but I don't have to do something for the sake of others, then you're not a bodhisattva. And if grasping rises, there is no view. So what I wanted to do just before we leave it here for now, I wanted to connect it with a verse for going for refuge. So I think that when we incorporate those departing from the four clingings to a way of going for refuge, then it says, I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Supreme Assembly. So just as we did at the beginning of this session in kind of taking the time to correct the motivation in terms of refuge and bodhicitta, we can think in our personal practice at home. First of all, we can think of death and impermanence, making sure that we do not cling on to this lifetime only, or that we don't practice the Dhamma with the orientation of just wanting to make this lifetime better. Of course, if it happens, why not? If we can use the Dhamma in order to make this lifetime better, of course, we want to do it, but that's not the main purpose. The main purpose is at the end to emerge from cyclic existence and to become Buddhists and to become Buddhas. So it says here, I go for refuge until I'm enlightened. We think of death and impermanence. We think of suffering of cyclic existence, what occurs to us in cyclic existence, and how would it be if we end up in miserable states of existence. And with that, we go for refuge until we're enlightened to the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the merits I create through generosity and so forth, may I become a Buddha in order to benefit of sentient beings. So then we think of the third line in parting from the four clinging. If I grasp at my own welfare, I'm not a bodhisattva. So I need to kind of think of the welfare of others in order then to think that may I become a Buddha to benefit all sentient beings. I need to think of many different things, such as, for example, self-cherishing is the door to all torments, and cherishing others is the foundation of all that is good. That all the Buddhas of the past have attained a state of enlightenment through cherishing others, whereas those that cherish themselves still continue to go in cyclic existence. That when I think about it in terms of numbers, then my happiness is definitely not important than the happiness of countless other living beings and so forth. So when we think of all those different reasons, then we can think that if I still cling to my own purpose, I'm not a bodhisattva. So therefore, by the merits that I create through generosity and so forth, may I become a Buddha to benefit all sentient beings. And finally, kind of also thinking of if there is, if grasping arises, there is no view, as it says here. If grasping arises, there is no view. Then in going for refuge, and this is also a really important thing to do when we go for refuge, sorry. if we can spend some time in our meditation before we go for refuge in thinking of I, right? So I go for refuge until I'm enlightened. So think about it as I, who do not independently exist, go for refuge until I'm enlightened. There is no inherently existing I that goes for refuge until I'm enlightened. I exist through depending upon cause and conditions. I exist and depends upon many parts. And I exist through being merely imputed and depends upon my body and mind. So this person that does not independently exist, I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. And by the merits that I, the independently, the one that does not exist independently, but the merits that I create through generosity and so forth, may I become a Buddha in order to benefit all sentient beings that also do not exist in and of themselves. They also exist and depends upon cause and conditions. They're also merely imputed by language and conceptions, and therefore the things I can do in order to benefit other living beings because they do not exist independently. So in this way, we combine this 4-line verse with going for refuge. Now, it seems like it's already 12 o'clock, so I'm sorry that I spoke too much. Have you got any questions before I leave it here for now? Is it one thing of not to suffer the form of suffering itself? Wanting. I don't get your question. Could you? Yeah. Wishing not to suffer, is it suffering in itself? I think that is wishing not to suffering is suffering in itself. Well, it depends, I think, of your attitudes towards suffering. You know, if you, again, kind of the word suffering in English has, I think, kind of this linguistic connotation. You know, we have our own idea that we form of what suffering is according to kind of our understanding of language. But then suffering itself is kind of in the word for that in Buddhist terminology, dukkha or suffering, or dumya in Tibetan, has a much greater implication. It refers to kind of all states which are dissatisfactory for us. So then it's not wanting that suffering in itself. Well, you can actually think that if you think that there's something that I can do in order to avoid that, not just recognize those things which are just not good for us, but if you recognize that there's something that I can do in order to avoid that, there's something that I can do in order to make sure that it will never arise in the future, it actually gives you a positive spin on suffering. So I think that you need to recognize suffering in order to recognize that there's something that you know that you can do in order to remove that. But if you only think of suffering, it makes you depressed, then of course, or it kind of compounds your suffering, there's not much point in thinking about it. No, so suffering can be, thinking of suffering can become suffering if you don't think of ways out of it. If you think of ways out of it, actually, it's not really suffering, it's turning it into, or the thought of it is not suffering, you're actually turning it into wisdom. It was there. If your mind is something that continues with you to the future, is your body is something that is borrowed. Yeah, it is said kind of, you know, this body is called in Buddhist terminology, the appropriated aggregate. No, so we appropriate it in a sense that we take it under the power of karma and afflictions, and whatever is all the different bodies that we take being under the control of karma and afflictions at some point will be discarded, will be cast aside. In some texts, like for example, Shantideva's Guide to Bodhisattva Way of Life, it says that this body is just like a guest house. So you check in for a certain duration, but at some point you will move on. So when you check into a guest house or into a hotel, Geshe Jamin that was here kind of quite a few years ago used to say that it's not that when you check into a guest house, you start buying your own sofas and think of how you're going to design the walls and paint them and change things in your in the room so that your life would be much better. You check in for a certain duration, you make the most out of it, and then you're willing to move on. So you can say that just like you borrow a room, we also borrow this body. We want to make the most out of it, but also in thinking that one day it will be left behind and we'll continue completely empty-handed. Hmm. Yeah, is there any karmic hold to the body? It's not that we choose it. Yeah, this is what, so when we say contaminated, appropriated, aggregate, the appropriated is the taking of the body. The contaminated, it means that we're under the control of karma and afflictions. And as such, we have no control. So the control is within, you can say within the hands of karma and afflictions. Well, now when I say within the hands of karma and afflictions, it's not that there is like a separate sentient entity that is karma that thinks of what would be the punishment that we'll get for actions that we've done before, or what would be the reward that we get for positive things that we did before. It's more like you have certain causes and conditions that we've created. Positive causes and conditions bring forward positive results. Negative causes and conditions bring forward negative results. And of course, there are permutations, like some, you can say some negative causes and conditions came together. They created a certain situation, but also positive causes and conditions can also affect that situation to a certain degree. So the body that we have taken is a body that we've taken because we're controlled by karma. So it's not that we had that moment of decision in which we, in a deliberate process, decided that we're going to be born to those parents in that gender, having those features and so forth. This was all, you can say, promoted or projected by our karma and afflictions. I mean, of course, we can, through our spiritual practice, we can develop greater and greater sense of independence. Like, for example, bodhisattvas can, when they're in their early stages of development, just by the force of their aspirations, they can make sure that they're born in some body that is of benefit to others. Like, for example, through their aspirations that are involved also with ethical discipline, they can you could say, direct themselves to being born as human beings or in other states of existence where they could be of benefit to others. But still, if they're just beginners bodhisattvas, the control is quite limited. The more we progress along the steps of the path, the more control we have, to the point in which you can even take a rebirth at will, but that's further down the road. Hmm. Well, I think that when you look at the question whether there are any other planets, yes or no, I mean, how would I know? or I don't know. But from a Buddhist perspective, we say yes. I mean, there are other realms of existence, those that we see and those that we cannot see. So you could say that those that we cannot see could actually exist in this place, could exist in other places. But when we speak of this place, we attach a certain form of physicality to it. But then do other realms have to have that form of physicality? I'm not sure. From a point of view of science, some say that there must be, since the universe is so infinite, there must be other planets, other world systems which have the capacity to support life. So if they have the capacity to support life and they have living beings in them, then the sentient beings also have minds. So from a Buddhist perspective, we speak about myriads worlds, right? That text, prayers, and explanation in certain philosophical texts that speak of, the 3 billion, I can't remember the term for that in English, but kind of billions of world systems that exist. Where they are, I don't know. But wherever they are and wherever there are living beings in those worlds, it is quite likely that the mind is still controlled by some forms of afflictions. And also, probably many of them are liberated. Let's leave it here for now. Sorry for holding you on for such a long time. So before we leave it here for now, let's just dedicate all the virtue and merit that we've accumulated in just thinking of these points. And since this is beginning, we're still in the first part of Sakadawa, which is a very powerful month. We can think that by whatever virtue we've created together through either discussing this, thinking about it in the future, may we be able to create all the causes and conditions for our own state of Buddhahood, so that we will be able to be of benefit to infinite other living beings. May the Supreme Jewel Bodhicitta that has not arisen arise and grow, and may that which has arisen not diminish but increase more and more. Due to the merits of these virtuous actions, may I quickly attain the state of a Guru Buddha and lead all living beings without exception into that enlightened state. The wish-granting, wish-fulfilling jewel, source of every single benefit and happiness in this world, to the incomparably kind Tenzin Gyatso, I beseech, may all your holy wishes be spontaneously fulfilled. And finally, for the long life of Kyabji Lama Sopa Rinpoche, and also we can include all the other people in Kopan Monastery that have contracted COVID-19, and then expand from that. People in Nepal, people in India, people everywhere around the world that not only affected by COVID-19, but by all things that plague the body and mind. So you uphold the Sibiru's moral way, who serves as bountiful bearer of all, sustaining, preserving, and spreading Majjuna's victorious doctrine, who masterfully accomplished magnificent prayers honoring the three jewels. Several of myself and others, your disciples, please live long. Thank you very much. Thank you.